every parent I know will be thinking about Maddie's family, her parents, and they'll be thinking about what they could do to help the parents.
This was a crime that touched the heart of everyone in the country, and everyone would like to see it resolved. So I hope Scotland Yard continue with their work, and I wish them success.
On the night of the 3rd of May 2007, a series of events unfolded at the Ocean Club Resort in Praia da Luz, Portugal, which have since become the subject of intense global scrutiny, particularly concerning the actions of Madeleine McCann's parents. At approximately 7:00 p.m., Kate and Gerry McCann put their 3 children to bed in apartment 5A. 3-year-old Madeleine, dressed in a pink and white Eeyore pajama set, was placed in the main bedroom with her cuddle cat soft toy and a blanket, while her twin siblings, Sean and Amelie, slept nearby. The front door of the apartment was locked. However, the sliding patio door was intentionally left unlocked. According to the McCanns, this was to facilitate easier access for their routine checks on the children. This decision has become a central point of contention in the case. For some observers, it represents a serious act of negligence. For others, it has been interpreted as a potential element in a staged event designed to conceal the truth. Kate and Gerry McCann, both experienced medical doctors from Rothley, Leicestershire, possessed a professional understanding of risk assessment. This background has led many to question their decision to leave 3 young children unsupervised in a ground-floor holiday apartment with an unsecured door. This scrutiny is compounded by a detail from a previous night when Madeleine had reportedly woken and asked, "Why didn't you come when me and Sean were crying?" indicating a pre-existing awareness of the children's vulnerability when left alone. The rationale behind such a decision has been widely debated. One perspective suggests the McCanns had become accustomed to this routine over the course of their holiday, leading to a sense of complacency. An alternative and more serious theory speculates that Madeleine may have already died before 7:00 p.m., possibly as the result of an accidental overdose of a sedative. In this scenario, the unlocked door would not be an oversight, but a deliberate part of a staged scene to support a subsequent abduction narrative. There are elements that have been cited in support of this darker hypothesis. It has been reported that Kate McCann, as a medical professional, had access to injectable sedatives and was in possession of multiple vials, some of which were found to be empty. While these were stated to be for personal use, their presence has raised analytical questions. If one were to hypothesize that Madeleine was given medication to aid sleep and an accidental fatality occurred, the unlocked door could serve 2 strategic purposes: to imply the presence of an intruder and to provide a discreet exit for the removal of the body. Adding another layer of complexity are reports concerning the state of the McCann's marriage at the time. It has been claimed that Kate McCann suspected her husband of having an affair, allegedly purchasing a surveillance device to monitor him. Such emotional strain, it is argued, might explain a critical lapse in judgment. Conversely, if a tragic accident had already occurred, this context could also provide a motive for the collaborative construction of a false narrative. If Madeleine were deceased by 7:00 p.m., every subsequent action takes on a different potential meaning. The unlocked patio door ceases to be a matter of convenience and becomes a calculated detail. An open door suggests an easy point of entry, reinforcing the abduction theory, and would have offered a logical route for removing a body without leaving signs of forced entry. The McCann's demeanor in the hours leading up to the reported disappearance has also been analyzed. They appeared relaxed and cheerful. While some view this as proof of their innocence, others suggest it could be interpreted as a performance. From this perspective, their calm attitude could be seen as a form of emotional distancing in preparation for the events that would unfold. These are not established facts, but theoretical constructs based on circumstantial details that challenge the official narrative. Questions persist. Why continue to leave the children unsupervised without any form of electronic monitoring? And why take such a risk for a dinner engagement situated only 55 meters away? While innocent explanations have been offered, they are often perceived as struggling against the weight of numerous unusual circumstances. If Madeleine had already died, it is theorized that the bedroom scene may have been arranged to appear undisturbed, with her body having been removed earlier. The powerful image of Madeleine sleeping with her cuddle cat, a symbol of innocence, becomes deeply ironic in this context. The room may have been a staged scene rather than a safe space. Kate McCann's later handling of the cuddle cat toy has been noted by observers as unusual. The significance of this toy was amplified when forensic dogs, trained to detect the scent of cadavers, later gave an alert on it. What was a comfort object may also be a key piece of forensic evidence. The hour between 7 o'clock p.m. and 8 o'clock p.m. could be the most critical in the entire case, potentially marking either the commission of a crime or the beginning of its concealment. If Madeleine had already died, everything that followed could be interpreted as part of a premeditated plan. The unlocked patio door may not simply represent poor judgment, but could be viewed as a signpost. Was it an innocent, albeit reckless, mistake, or the first step in a carefully constructed deception? The precise truth may remain elusive, but this initial decision is sufficient to prompt a critical examination of the entire narrative. If Kate and Gerry McCann were innocent, their actions were demonstrably reckless. If they were not, then 7 o'clock p.m. was not the start of a nightmare, but the commencement of a cover-up. At 8:30 p.m., Kate and Gerry McCann left apartment 5A to join their friends, a group now known as the Tapas 7, for dinner at the nearby Tapas restaurant, approximately 55 meters away. They selected a table near the window, which they later claimed allowed them to monitor the apartment. Notably, a specific request to reserve this table was recorded in the restaurant's booking ledger. The accompanying note explained that the McCann's children were alone in the apartment, a fact that once publicized generated considerable controversy and questioning. This entry in the booking log effectively advertised that apartment 5A was without adult supervision. Some have interpreted this as a candid, if careless, detail. Others have considered the possibility that it was a deliberate act to establish the apartment's vulnerability, thereby lending credence to the idea of it being an easy target for an intruder. Whether intentional or not, this note has become one of the most debated pieces of evidence in the case. During the meal, witnesses described Kate and Gerry McCann as appearing relaxed, laughing, drinking wine, and engaging in casual conversation. To many observers, this behavior has seemed incongruous with the circumstances. With 3 children under the age of 4 alone in a ground-floor apartment with an unlocked door, the notion that parents could enjoy a carefree dinner has been deemed implausible by some and negligent by others. A third interpretation suggests the behavior was rehearsed. Adding to this line of inquiry is the fact that their apartment, 5A, was not actually visible from their table due to obstructions such as trees and walls. The assertion that they were monitoring the apartment was, at best, a misapprehension and, at worst, part of a constructed narrative to imply a vigilance that did not exist. The group had implemented a system of checks, supposedly occurring every 25 to 30 minutes, but the precise timing and thoroughness of these checks remain contested. Subsequent statements from members of the group contained inconsistencies, leading to widespread doubt. A recurring question in the investigation is why the McCanns opted against using the Ocean Club's readily available babysitting services. It has been suggested they may have preferred their privacy, or that it was a way to maintain control over the environment. However, if one considers the hypothesis that Madeleine had already died, the absence of a babysitter would ensure no independent third-party witness could contradict their version of events. Several theories have emerged regarding the dinner. One suggests the McCanns were simply overconfident in the safety of their routine. Another proposes the dinner was a calculated undertaking to establish an alibi, providing multiple witnesses to their public presence, and framing a timeline around a supposed abduction. If Madeleine had died earlier that evening, whether from a fall or sedation, the dinner could have served as the first act in an elaborate performance, where behaving normally would be essential to maintain an illusion of ignorance and create emotional and physical distance from the incident in the apartment. There is also a theory that the McCanns were in a state of uncertainty, possibly aware that something was wrong, but unsure of how to proceed. In this scenario, their relaxed demeanor could be interpreted not as comfort, but as shock or denial, or perhaps an attempt to gauge the reactions of others. The emotional contrast between the social dinner scene and the potential tragedy in apartment 5A is stark. If Madeleine was already deceased, the laughter and wine transform from signs of innocence into symbols of detachment, a concept many find difficult to process. From a psychological perspective, it has been suggested that such behavior could be an example of compartmentalization, a defense mechanism allowing individuals to function by separating themselves from traumatic events. If they were involved in or aware of Madeleine's fate, this behavior could be interpreted as an attempt to suppress guilt and evade detection. The note in the reservation book, the choice of table, the refusal to use a babysitter, and the apparent calm at dinner all contribute to the suspicion surrounding this hour. What on the surface appears to be a normal holiday meal begins to assume the characteristics of a potential staging ground for a global story. This period from 8:30 p.m. onwards cannot be viewed in isolation. Every decision, every conversation carries potential weight. If Madeleine's disappearance was the result of an abduction by a stranger, then this dinner was a reckless misstep. If, however, it was part of a cover-up, then it was the opening act in a long and calculated performance. The evening in Praia da Luz may have seemed ordinary to those at the Tapas restaurant, but it is possible that a much darker reality had already taken hold. The dinner, far from being a simple meal, may have been the moment reality bifurcated into two versions, one public and filled with concern, the other private and shrouded in secrets. At 9:05 p.m., Gerry McCann left the dinner table to perform a check on his children in apartment 5A, as part of the group's informal monitoring system. Upon entering the apartment, he noted that the door to the children's bedroom was open wider than they had left it. According to his subsequent statement, he saw all three children, including Madeleine, apparently asleep in their beds. He did not switch on the light, did not approach the beds closely, and did not inspect the window or the shutters. After this brief observation, he pulled the door almost closed and returned to the restaurant. This moment has become one of the most critically examined points in the timeline. Gerry McCann's actions appear remarkably cursory, particularly given the circumstances. As a cardiologist, a profession that demands meticulous observation and the recognition of subtle signs of distress, his decision not to conduct a more thorough check has been described by some analysts as incongruous with his professional mindset. The abnormally open bedroom door, coupled with Madeleine's recent nocturnal crying, would, it is argued, have prompted a more cautious parent to investigate further. Key questions remain central to the theories that question the McCann's account. Why did Gerry McCann not inspect the room more carefully? Why did he not physically verify the well-being of the children or check the window, which would later become a focal point of the abduction narrative? Several explanations have been proposed. One posits that the check was simply negligent. he may have assumed all was well and performed the minimum action required before rejoining his friends. Another, more sinister possibility is that if Madeleine had already died, this visit to the apartment was a performative act intended to establish a specific timeline. A quick, unlit, and unverified check would allow him to maintain the facade that everything was normal at 9:05 p.m., an alternative interpretation of Gerry McCann's 9:05 p.m. A check posits that if Madeleine's death had occurred earlier, through sedation or an accident, then his role in this moment may have been a deliberate action to construct a timeline. By entering the apartment and stating he saw her asleep, he would have effectively established that she was alive at that time, thereby shifting the focus of any investigation to the period that followed and reinforcing the subsequent claim of an abduction. The detail of the open bedroom door is critical. It could have been left ajar intentionally, either as part of a staged scene or because someone had recently left the room. The lack of a thorough investigation into this anomaly has been cited by critics as undermining the narrative of parental vigilance. If Madeleine were already deceased, the open door could be interpreted as a carefully placed clue intended to suggest an external intrusion. A psychological perspective offers the possibility of subconscious avoidance. If Gerry McCann knew or suspected something had happened, his minimal check might reflect a desire not to confront the reality. While such denial can be a feature of trauma, it can also be analyzed as a tactic to maintain emotional distance and protect a pre-planned narrative. From a behavioral standpoint, his return to the dinner table and his reportedly calm demeanor are subjects of analysis. He resumed his meal and conversation without indicating any concern, which some might find inconsistent with having just witnessed a potential anomaly in his children's room. If Madeleine were already dead, this level of emotional control has been described as deeply unsettling, suggesting a focus on maintaining a predetermined story. The impact of this check is foundational to the entire case timeline. If Madeleine was alive at 9:05 p.m., her disappearance must have occurred after this point. However, if this sighting was not genuine, the actual timeline of events is potentially pushed back to before the McCanns went to dinner. Consequently, every detail of the case is influenced by this single moment. If the account was inaccurate, it alters the entire investigation. If it was truthful but overlooked crucial signs, it suggests a critical failure of oversight. Either interpretation renders the 9:05 p.m. check a turning point, where the line between accident and deception becomes blurred. The events of that moment remain uncertain, but what is evident is that Gerry McCann's actions, whether interpreted as careless or calculated, were instrumental in shaping the narrative that followed. His check became the last time Madeleine was reportedly seen alive, making it one of the most critical and controversial minutes in the investigation. At 9:15 p.m., Jane Tanner, a member of the Tapas 7 group, left the restaurant to check on her own children. As she walked past apartment 5A, she reported seeing a man walking away from the apartment in an easterly direction, carrying a small child in light-colored pajamas. Jane Tanner did not raise an alarm at the time and only reported this sighting after Madeleine's disappearance was announced. The timing, just 10 minutes after Gerry McCann's check, has made this testimony a focal point of debate. The child was described as barefoot and wearing pajamas similar to Madeleine's, yet the witness remained silent for a critical period. This delay has raised analytical questions. Explanations for her behavior vary. One theory is that she may have been influenced by the subsequent abduction narrative promoted by the McCanns, causing her to retrospectively interpret what she saw through that lens. Another theory explores the possibility of complicity, suggesting the sighting was purposefully introduced to support the abduction story. This testimony was later discounted by investigators, who identified the man as another tourist carrying his own sleeping daughter home from a creche facility. Nevertheless, her initial account provided early substantiation for the kidnapping narrative. A third theory considers the influence of group dynamics and emotional turmoil, suggesting her memory may have been distorted, or that she felt pressured to provide helpful information. Psychologically, her inaction suggests either a failure to perceive a threat or an internal conflict. If the sighting were genuine, her hesitation allowed a potential abductor to escape. If it were false or misremembered, it added a significant layer of confusion to the investigation. Jane Tanner's credibility has been repeatedly questioned, with some arguing she was a well-intentioned witness and others pointing to the convenient timing and lack of corroborating evidence. The fact that police eventually dismissed the sighting reinforces these doubts. A key question remains: was this sighting part of a coordinated effort to construct a cover story? Or was it an unwitting contribution to a narrative spiral created by panic and suggestion? If the McCanns were involved in their daughter's death, Jane Tanner's sighting at 9:15 p.m. following Gerry McCann's check at 9:05 p.m. effectively creates a 10-minute window for the abduction. If both accounts were unreliable, they serve to collectively divert attention from an earlier moment of crisis. The image of a barefoot child being carried into the night is a powerful one, but if it was the product of suggestion or strategy, it becomes a symbol of manipulation. The events of 9:15 p.m. remain ambiguous, but Jane Tanner's testimony continues to shape public understanding of the case. At 9:30 p.m., Matthew Oldfield, another member of the group, offered to check on the McCann children. He entered apartment 5A via the unlocked patio door and approached the children's bedroom, which he noted was open wider than expected. He reported hearing no sounds and did not turn on the light. Crucially, he did not look directly at the beds to visually confirm Madeleine's presence, and later could not recall the state of the window or shutters. This check has been widely described as superficial and has drawn criticism, as it was the last opportunity to verify Madeleine's safety before she was reported missing. Matthew Oldfield's vague recollections have left significant gaps in the timeline, and the lack of detailed observation has raised the possibility that this check was not merely careless, but part of a calculated sequence of events. One theory proposes that he may have been influenced, directly or indirectly, to perform a cursory check that would avoid discovering anything amiss. If Madeleine had already died, an unobservant visit would ensure her absence or condition remained undetected. Another possibility is that group dynamics, shaped by a false sense of normality projected by the McCanns, led to his casual approach. A third hypothesis suggests his vague account served a strategic purpose by helping to narrow the abduction window to the period between 9:30 p.m. and 10 p.m. The recurring detail of the open bedroom door is also significant. Despite multiple witnesses noting it was ajar or open, no one appears to have investigated the reason. Matthew Oldfield's inability to recall whether the window was open or the curtains were disturbed only deepens the mystery. Psychologically, his behavior could be interpreted as a product of a false sense of security, or, if he was aware of a problem, an effort to distance himself from direct involvement. The check provided another layer of perceived normality to the timeline, creating the impression that multiple adults were monitoring the children. If he had discovered Madeleine was missing at 9:30 p.m., the official story would have been fundamentally different. Ultimately, Matthew Oldfield's check is remembered more for what it missed than for what it confirmed. Whether careless or complicit, his role at this moment is critical and remains one of the most unsettling and pivotal parts of the mystery. At 10 o'clock p.m., Kate McCann returned to apartment 5A for her check. This became the defining moment of the case. She reported finding the children's bedroom door wide open, the window open, and the external shutter raised. Madeleine was gone, with only her cuddle cat toy and pink blanket left on the bed. Kate McCann ran back to the Tapas restaurant, screaming the words, "They've taken her!" Her cry shattered the evening calm in Praia da Luz and launched one of the most publicized missing person cases in modern history. Kate McCann's immediate assertion that Madeleine had been kidnapped became a point of early analytical focus. There were no signs of forced entry. The window was open, but there was no damage to the frame or the shutter. Her choice of words, framing the event as a deliberate abduction rather than a disappearance, has been interpreted in two distinct ways. One perspective holds that it was the instinctive reaction of a panicked mother. A counter-argument, however, suggests the statement felt precise and rehearsed for an initial response. Furthermore, her decision to leave her twin children, Sean and Amelie, unattended in the apartment while she raised the alarm has also been scrutinized. While this could be seen as an act of desperate urgency, it has also been questioned as a decision made to maintain control of a developing narrative. Around the same time, a significant but controversial piece of witness testimony emerged from the Smith family, who were walking approximately 500 meters from the Ocean Club. They observed a man carrying a blonde girl of about 4 years old, who was barefoot, dressed in pajamas, and appeared to be asleep or unconscious. The man was walking hurriedly, and what particularly struck witness Martin Smith was the child's motionless posture. Weeks later, upon seeing news footage of Gerry McCann carrying one of his children, Smith reported that the man he had seen resembled Gerry. This account, known as the Smith sighting, directly contradicts Gerry McCann's stated location within the Tapas group at that time. If accurate, it would place him near the beach, heading away from the apartment complex with a child. At the same moment, Kate McCann was raising the alarm. This sighting has become a central element in a major alternative theory, that Madeleine died earlier in the evening, possibly from an accidental sedative overdose or a fall, and her parents subsequently orchestrated a cover-up. In this scenario, the open window and Kate's cry were pre-planned elements to establish an abduction narrative. Gerry's role would have been to discreetly remove Madeleine's body while Kate initiated the public alert. The report that Kate McCann possessed injectable sedatives, with some vials found empty, has been cited as circumstantial evidence lending weight to this theory. Kate's scream has been subject to varied interpretations. Some hear raw maternal anguish, while others have analyzed it as a performance timed for maximum emotional impact. Gerry McCann's behavior also came under scrutiny. He was seen displaying devastation, yet if he was the man seen by the Smith family, this emotional display could be viewed as part of a performance. The possibility that he had just concealed his daughter's body before rejoining the group to participate in the search has been the subject of intense public and media speculation. Psychologically, the parents' behavior during this period has been analyzed as occupying a fine line between trauma and control. Kate's vocal distress could be interpreted as a genuine reaction or a projection of guilt, with her immediate focus on a kidnapping narrative seen as an attempt to establish a specific version of events quickly. The timing of these events has also been highlighted. If Kate discovered Madeleine was missing just before 10 p.m., and the Smith sighting occurred almost simultaneously, the synchronization has been described as too precise to be coincidental, raising the possibility of coordination. The Smith sighting was not heavily emphasized in the early stages of the investigation, and the identification of Gerry McCann was never fully confirmed. Nevertheless, the testimony remains one of the few independent observations from outside the Tapas 7 group. Following Kate's alarm, chaos ensued at the Ocean Club, with staff and guests initiating a search. By the time police arrived, the potential crime scene had been significantly compromised. This moment at 10 p.m. serves as the narrative turning point in the case, where the story of a missing child became intertwined with the story of a possible cover-up. Between approximately 10:10 p.m. and 10:41 p.m., a period of time that has attracted significant scrutiny occurred. After Kate McCann raised the alarm, Gerry McCann did not immediately contact the police. Instead, he reportedly asked Matthew Oldfield to notify the resort's front desk. During the ensuing 31 minutes, the group made 31 phone calls, none of which were to law enforcement. The official call to the Portuguese authorities was not logged until 10:41 p.m. This delay is highly controversial. While a state of panic is one explanation, the decision to delegate the call to police and prioritize communication with family and friends in the UK over contacting local emergency services has been viewed by critics as deeply suspicious. One theory posits that this time was used to align the narrative among the members of the Tapas 7, allowing them to agree on timelines and key details before the authorities arrived. Another theory suggests the delay provided a necessary window for Gerry McCann to complete the concealment of Madeleine's body and reintegrate himself into the group without raising suspicion, aligning with the timeline of the Smith sighting. The presence of empty sedative vials has intensified speculation that an accidental overdose may have occurred, in which case the delay could reflect a period of devising a plausible story amid the shock and fear of legal repercussions. Delegating the initial report to Matthew Oldfield also distanced Gerry McCann from direct interaction with authorities at a critical stage. From a psychological perspective, this period has been interpreted as a moment of control masked by chaos. Supporters of the McCanns argue that cultural confusion and shock in a foreign country could explain the delay. However, critics point to their professional backgrounds as medical doctors, accustomed to making decisions under pressure, suggesting the delay was not the result of confusion, but of calculation. When the police were finally called, the opportunity to preserve the scene had passed. This period of inaction and private communication has never been satisfactorily explained and has undermined trust in the McCann's account, creating a space for suspicion to take root and shifting the central question from who took Madeleine to what happened in those missing 31 minutes. At 10:41 p.m., Portuguese police officially received the alert. A frantic and chaotic search involving around 60 staff, guests, and locals continued until 4:30 a.m., but no trace of Madeleine was found. Kate McCann was seen repeatedly calling her daughter's name, while Gerry McCann appeared visibly shaken and helped coordinate the search efforts. To some, this was the natural behavior of anguished parents. To skeptics, their participation felt overly deliberate. Subsequent details have cast a shadow over these actions. Kate McCann's decision to wash the cuddle cat's soft toy has drawn serious suspicion, particularly as forensic dogs would later alert to the scent of a cadaver on it, raising the possibility this was an attempt to destroy evidence. If the parents were responsible, their active involvement in the search could be interpreted as a strategy to deflect guilt, a known behavior in some criminal cases. The theory that Madeleine's body was moved well before the search began would explain why no trace of her was found. The Smith sighting supports this possibility, suggesting that by the time the resort was being searched, it was already a futile effort. In the scenario of an accidental death, the entire search becomes a deeply manipulative act designed not to find a missing child, but to reinforce the narrative of an abduction. The Renault Scenic, a vehicle hired by the McCanns several weeks after the disappearance, later became a focus of the investigation. Forensic dogs trained to detect the scent of a cadaver alerted in the boot of the car, and it was reported that the vehicle had been driven over 3,000 kilometers in just a few days. While circumstantial, these details have been used to support the theory that Madeleine's body may have been temporarily hidden and moved at a later date. The initial response of the Portuguese police, the GNR, has also been a subject of criticism. It has been reported that the officers first on the scene were not specialists in missing child investigations, and that apartment 5A was not immediately secured, allowing numerous people to walk through it and potentially compromise forensic evidence. It has been argued that the chaotic nature of the initial search may have inadvertently benefited any party seeking to conceal evidence, as the lack of immediate forensic procedure meant crucial early hours were lost. Psychologically, the contrast between the McCanns' public displays of grief and certain private actions has fueled doubt. The precision of their respective roles in the immediate aftermath, Kate's vocal distress, and Gerry's calm leadership, has continued to trouble observers. The image of a community searching through the night is a powerful symbol of hope, but the possibility that this effort was based on a false narrative has led to painful questions. By 4:30 a.m., the search had yielded nothing. Madeleine had vanished without a trace. In August 2007, the investigation took a significant turn with the arrival of two specialist British sniffer dogs. Eddie, a cadaver dog, alerted to the scent of death in several key locations: behind the sofa and in a wardrobe in apartment 5A, on Kate McCann's clothing, on Madeleine's cuddle cat soft toy, and in the boot of the hired Renault Scenic. Keela, a blood detection dog, also alerted at the spot behind the sofa. Kate McCann explained the scent on her clothes and the toy by citing her work as a doctor, where she may have come into contact with deceased patients. However, critics, including the dog handlers, noted that the alerts were highly specific to locations and items connected to Madeleine, which they argued was inconsistent with general contamination. The Renault Scenic became a further point of forensic interest. Both dogs alerted to the vehicle, and forensic tests revealed a partial DNA sample in the boot containing markers consistent with Madeleine's. While Portuguese police viewed this as strong support for the theory that the car was used to move her body, the evidence was legally complex. The sample was mixed and potentially degraded, and the car had been driven by police, raising the possibility of contamination. Nevertheless, questions remain as to why any trace of Madeleine's DNA would be in a car hired long after she disappeared. These forensic findings combine to form a theory that Madeleine died on the night of 3rd of May, perhaps due to an accidental fall or sedative overdose. In this scenario, her body was temporarily hidden. A nearby church has been speculated as a possible location, and moved weeks later in the rental car. From a psychological standpoint, Kate McCann's explanations for the forensic alerts appeared to some as attempts to rationalize incriminating evidence, and her subsequent refusal to answer 48 key questions from Portuguese police deepened suspicion. The forensic findings remain legally inconclusive, but investigatively compelling, transforming items like the cuddle cat from symbols of innocence into forensic clues. Madeleine McCann's parents projected the image of a stable family, but reports of marital tension, including claims that Kate had purchased a surveillance device to monitor Gerry, suggest a more complex dynamic. Their pattern of leaving the children unattended, noted in a restaurant booking log, has been interpreted as establishing a narrative of accessibility that could support a later claim of abduction. When Madeleine was discovered missing, Kate's immediate declaration of a kidnapping, Gerry's delegation of the police call while 31 private calls were made, and Kate's decision to wash the cuddle cat have all been scrutinized. As an anesthetist, Kate McCann's access to sedatives has also been noted, raising the possibility of an accidental overdose. Her refusal to answer police questions, contrasted with Gerry's composed media appearances and the couple's swift mobilization of a fund and public relations professionals, created an image that some interpreted as calculated control rather than proactive hope. In September 2007, Kate and Gerry McCann were officially named arguidos, or formal suspects, by the Portuguese judiciary, largely due to the forensic alerts and inconsistencies in their statements. Less than a year later, in July 2008, this status was lifted, citing insufficient evidence. The reversal led to speculation of political influence, particularly following public support for the McCanns from the then UK Prime Minister, Gordon Brown. In 2011, the British Metropolitan Police launched Operation Grange, a full review of the case. However, in 2020, the focus shifted to a new suspect, Christian Bruckner, a German convicted sex offender with a criminal history in the Algarve. Despite his status as a person of interest, no direct forensic evidence has ever linked him to Madeleine's disappearance. This has led critics to question if he is a convenient scapegoat, a narrative shift to redirect scrutiny away from other lines of inquiry. The case has also been fought on digital platforms, where social media has become a battleground for competing theories, with online communities voicing deep distrust of the official narrative and focusing on the many unanswered questions. After nearly 2 decades, the disappearance remains one of the most haunting mysteries of our time. The forensic alerts, behavioral inconsistencies, and suspicious timelines form a complex mosaic of doubt. The introduction of Christian Bruckner as a suspect may have shifted public pressure, but it has not brought the case to a definitive resolution, leaving a lingering fear that the truth has been obscured by politics, media management, and the passage of time. As the years turn into decades, the name Madeleine McCann remains etched in the public consciousness, a symbol of a story without an ending. Faced with a labyrinth of conflicting theories, forensic ambiguities, and actions that defy simple explanation, how do we navigate the path to understanding? When does parental protection cross the line into public deception? And what is the true cost of a narrative so fiercely controlled? In a case where every clue seems to lead only to more questions, where do you believe the truth lies? And what does justice for a lost 3-year-old girl truly look like now? Thanks for watching. How do you feel about these arguments and theories? Does it give you a different perspective on the case? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to receive the latest notifications.